this is Demetris from Perfect English. As you all know, Perfect English is a language school that is based in Athens, Greece and teaches absolutely pitch-perfect native speaker English. Today I'm going to talk to you about phrasal verbs. You don't know how many students have come up to me over all those years that I've been teaching the English language and complain about how difficult phrasal verbs are. They usually say, I don't know which phrasal verbs to learn, there are so many of them out there. Or it's impossible for me to understand the meaning of phrasal verbs. Or sometimes they tell me I get confused with phrasal verbs. I'm not sure I know how to use them. Well, we have a solution to that problem. Because this is one video from a series of 2 videos where I'm going to be teaching to you the most common phrasal verbs. Together we're going to learn 50 phrasal verbs. In today's video we're going to learn half of them. So watch this video and by the end you will have learned 25 very important phrasal verbs. Before we start, let me explain why you need to know these verbs. They are very important both for daily communication, because native speakers both in England and in the United States use phrasal verbs all the time. They're very common in everyday language. But also, if you are planning to take an examination, like the first certificate in English or the proficiency in English, phrasal verbs are often tested in the vocabulary section, sometimes in the grammar section, and for sure in the listening comprehension section. So, one way or the other, whether you want to learn English for the sake of communication or for the sake of taking an exam, you need to know these phrasal verbs. So without further ado, let's move on. And we're going to start with bring up. Bring up means to mention something, to say something. Here's an example. I hate to bring it up, but you forgot to send me the invitation to the wedding. Here, the speaker is a little bit embarrassed. He doesn't want to mention the subject, but he has to do so. So he says, I hate to bring it up. I hate to mention it. Bring up. That means raise a child. Parents raise their children. They bring up their children. So parents should bring up their children with love and affection. Call off. That means to cancel something. An example is the lesson was called off because the teacher was sick. That means the lesson was cancelled. Cheer up. That means to try to make somebody feel happier. So here's an example. I was having a bad day, but my friends cheered me up by taking me to the movies. So when somebody is feeling depressed, is not feeling very well, something can happen or some people can do something to cheer them up and make them feel better. Come up with something. To think of an idea or to think of a solution to a problem. Here's an example. We were all stuck, but Anna came up with a solution. Bless your heart. So if somebody comes up with a solution, they find the solution when other people have not been able to do so. Let's move on to the next set of phrasal verbs. Here they are. So the next one is come up, which means something happens unexpectedly when you don't expect it to happen. An example is, I was going to come and see you, but something came up and I have to cancel. When we say something came up, we mean that something unexpected, something we didn't think was going to happen, actually happened and has changed our plans. The next one is come across, which means to find something by chance. Here's an example. I came across my old leather boots while cleaning the house, but they don't fit me anymore. That means that person was not looking for his leather boots, but he found them anyway. The next one is cut down on, which means to reduce. It doesn't mean to stop doing something, it means to do less of it, to reduce it. Here's an example. You should cut down on sweets if you want to stay fit and healthy. So cut down on sweets means to eat fewer sweets in the future. The next one is drop by. That means to visit somebody for a short time and usually without giving notice. Here's an example. If you're around here, drop by to say hello. Drop by means come by my house or maybe come by the office without needing a special invitation. The next one is drop off. That means to take somebody somewhere in a car and leave them somewhere. Here's an example. It's raining outside, so I'll give you a ride to the station and drop you off at the entrance. That means that person is going to take the other person in his car, drive him all the way to the station and allow him to come out of the car at the entrance of the station. Now let us move on to the next set. The next phrasal verb is fall apart, which means to be destroyed. Here's an example that if you live in Greece you're all familiar with. The government tried to save the economy, but in the end it fell apart anyway. As you know, the Greek economy was in a big mess for many years. It has just started to recover. So we can say that the Greek economy fell apart, which means was destroyed. The next one is figure out, very common in American English, much more so than in British English where they usually say work out. That means to understand something or to find the answer. And it usually implies that it's not so easy to understand it or find the answer. So here's a typical example. It took him 2 days, but he finally figured out the answer to the problem. Notice the use of finally to show how difficult it was to find the answer, to figure it out. The next phrasal verb is fill in. That means to give somebody information about something that he or she has missed. An example is, don't worry that you missed the meeting. I'll fill you in on what we talked about. That means I'll give you all the information that you do not have right now. The next phrasal verb is fill up. If you are driving a car, you need to know this phrasal verb. It means to put gas in the car until the deposit is full. So here's an example. We stopped at the gas station to fill up, as we had a long way ahead of us. So to fill up means to fill the deposit with gas. The next phrasal verb is get away, which means to escape. Here's an example. The police arrived too late. The robbers managed to get away, which means the robbers managed to escape. Now we're going to move on to the next set. Here they are. So the next phrasal verb is get along with, which means to have a friendly relationship with somebody. An example would be, I like my English class because I get along with my classmates really well. Get along is common in American English, whereas in British English, British people normally say get on with. So a British person would say, I like my English class because I get on with my classmates really well. That means have a friendly relationship. We can also say not get along with or not get on with, which means have a bad relationship. So in that case, that person would probably say, I don't like my English class because I don't get along with my classmates really well. Let's move on to the next phrasal verb, which is get up. Most of you know it anyway, which means to wake up. An example would be, I love getting up early in the morning so that I can see the sun rise. I don't know if that describes you, but I suppose most Greek people do not enjoy getting up early in the morning, as opposed to Americans, who normally get up at around 6 or 6:30. Let's move on to the next one. Get back to, which means to return to someone or something. For example, to return to your house or to return to an activity. Here's an example. I will move on now, but I will get back to this topic later on. Meaning, I have now moved away from this topic to a new one, but I will return to this topic later on. There is another phrasal verb which looks similar to the previous one, but it has a totally different meaning. And here I understand why some of my students are so upset with phrasal verbs. This one is get back at. Do you see the difference? Get back to versus get back at. Get back at means to get revenge on somebody, to harm somebody because they have harmed you. Here's an example. Joe betrayed my secrets, but I will get back at him. I'll tell his wife he's cheating on her. that he's having a relationship with another woman. So I will get back at him, I will take my revenge on him. And the next one is give in, which means to surrender in a fight or an argument, to stop the fight or argument because you can't continue. Here's an example. Tom is a real fighter. He never gives in, no matter how difficult the situation is. So if you do not give in, you do not surrender, you keep trying. And that's the right attitude, isn't it? And now let's move on to the final set. Actually, sorry, there's one more set. So let's continue with give away, which means to give something for free. An example would be, at the entrance of the supermarket, they're giving away free drinks. That means they're giving free drinks to all the customers without asking them to pay for them. They're giving them for free. Let's move on to give up, which means to stop a bad habit. A classic example would be, you need to give up smoking. It's bad for your health. So when you give up a bad habit, you stop doing it. The next phrasal verb is go ahead, which is normally something we say to give permission to someone to do something or to say something. For example, go ahead, explain to me why you are so late. I've been waiting for an hour. So that means the person who is speaking is very upset and he wants the other person to explain why they're late. So before listening to their explanation, they say or they urge them to go ahead, to continue. The next phrasal verb is a very common one, to go over. To go over means to examine something. Normally in a classroom when you examine the material that you have for the day. An example of that would be, go over your receipt to make sure they charge you correctly. That means look at the receipt, look at its item that you have paid for, make sure you have paid the right amount. So go over means examine it fully, thoroughly and carefully. The next phrasal verb is grow up. Children say that. It means to become older each year until you are an adult. It's the process of becoming an adult. So it takes a long time to grow up. However, as the example will show, some people never grow up. Because, the example says, some children never grow up, but continue to act like children all their lives. So do cats, by the way, if you adopt them. The next one is hang on or hold on. Both of these phrasal verbs mean to wait. Here's an example. Hang on a second. Or hold on a second. Are you sure Tom and Mary are coming with us? Okay. And now we move on to the final set. Here they are. We have 3 more phrasal verbs. So, the next one is hang out, which means to spend time with your friends. An example would be, on Saturday evening, I always hang out with my friends and have a good time, which means I always go out with my friends and stay with them for a long time. And I do this regularly. The next phrasal verb is hang up, which means to end a telephone call, sometimes before the other person is ready. So, here's the example. I was trying to explain to her the situation, but she hung up on me. How rude. She hung up on me means she put an end to our phone call. And the last phrasal verb for today is keep on, which is always followed by an ing, which means to continue to do what you're doing. Here's an example. The boss asked Jane if she wanted to go home, but she said no and kept on working, which means she continued to work. Okay? So that was it for today. If you want to contact us, here are the details, our phone number and our email. And I look forward to teaching you another set of phrasal verbs in my next video. Bye.